Hello out there. Welcome to our podcast this week with the Brand and the Source. This is Coach EJ, the Brand.
And Coach Aaron, the Source.
Aaron, I was having a conversation with another coach, a couple coaches actually. This has been coming up about 2 or 3 weeks. It's about player development and winning. And what does that really mean? I think player development is about winning, and we lose that in translation. So I want to get our side of the story from a training standpoint and from a player development standpoint in terms of teams and individuals. So what's your angle on this, man?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, and it's two sides of the same coin. And you had talked about the goal is to win. And right. That's the goal in sports. That's the ultimate, is we're trying to win. But the other side of the coin, and again, maybe because I'm a trainer, is player development and progressing and getting better is also winning. And you can't always measure the success of an athlete just by its wins and losses, by an athlete's wins and losses.
Right.
Track and field is a perfect example. You're only going to have one winner. You got 8 people in a race. You got one winner. You got second and third and, that sort of thing. But you can be in a race and you can be in 5th place. But if you set a personal best, isn't that winning?
It is.
So yeah, I think it gets conflated with a whole bunch of other things and images and stuff. But and maybe it's because I come from a track background and we have to have that perspective versus just an ultimate score, team score. This group versus that group. But to me, when I played baseball, if I went 3 for 3, yeah, we might have got blown out 10-0, but I won.
Right.
In a sense. So again, I just have a different perspective, but I think we should talk about both sides because, you had made a good point about the pursuit of winning, and I want you to go ahead and stress that and articulate that. And, I'll go on that other side from my perspective.
Yeah, it's definitely a two-sided coin, and they both need to work together from an individual standpoint and from the team standpoint. And we need to, and players, athletes, parents who are listening, you need to understand, they work together and they need to always coexist together. So the side I'm coming from, Aaron, is the side of you have a team and players are trying to develop in your system. Let's use baseball as an example, or even football. Or any team sport, basketball, and there are individual goals within your team and during the game. One, as a game, you have this personal individual battle between the pitcher and the batter going at each other. That's called competing to win, because the end all is get on base, score, run for the team so we can win the game. But within that battle, there's that player development of, what did you do on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday to get ready for that game on Saturday with your swing or that competition level that you have with that pitcher? What were some of the goals you were trying to accomplish that week to have a win or a result that could be really good? So I like to come from the side of, player development is important, and you have that goal of getting to your purpose, but you're trying to also help your team win a game, and that's called competing. And I think competing gets lost in player development because everybody's just thinking about just their own individual thing, and they forget about the goal of the win for the team and trying to compete, because I think competition is important in player development as well as the win. Now, you can talk about that point of that individual personal best, which I think is critical too, because both have to, like I said earlier, have to coexist. But I think a lot of athletes these days, Aaron, and you can help me with this too, is people forget how to win and compete in competition. And that is part of player development, not only just the training side of it, but they lose the sight of that. That training was to teach you how to compete and to win. And so I'm coming from, very similar cloth than you are, but I just don't see it a lot in this generation of them understanding what competition is. And, us talking to a guest we had on a podcast some time ago, we talked about, competing, and doing that. So that's kind of my viewpoint a little bit on it, Aaron, a little bit. I have more to talk about with you about this, but that's kind of my initial thought.
Yeah. I think it was Shooty Babbitt that we were talking about, the competitiveness,
right?
And because he's also he's a scout,
right?
And we talked about basically, what are the things that he looks for, and he's talking about, hey, I'm looking for a guy who's trying to get it done and who's competitive, and I agree. As a coach, former coach myself, that's really what I'm looking at. In essence, if there's one quality I'm looking at for an athlete that I'm going to take, it's that first.
Okay.
That first and foremost. Then the athleticism, then the technical skills, then the sport IQ.
Wow.
But again, from having my trainer's hat on, and seeing this industry grow the last 25 years, and where it was just first kids playing sports to now a business, and the proliferation of people like me and travel teams and kind of all these organized businesses that are in athletics, I do think that has gotten lost, because especially now with analytics,
right?
You almost, in a lot of cases, you take the competitiveness out of the training sometimes, because these kids are so caught up in some of these processes and in these analytical results, they forget just how to compete in practice and how to apply that. Well, I talk about, today when I have kids come in, I say, hey, you know what? Today we're eating red meat. And basically what that means is we're just going after it. I'm not worried about, the technical aspects of everything. I just want you to get used to going after it. And, it's funny because you can go day after day after day in this whole process of just executing these drills and these techniques.
Okay.
But like I said, if you don't pepper in some of that competitive aspect, whether it's just saying, hey guys, we're trying to do this in this time today, or maybe as a team sport, you're setting up some versus sorts of scenarios.
Right.
The only time they really get to compete is game time. Well, if you have some kids who can't really or don't have that or can't really tap into that, that's the only time they really get to experience it or try to experience it. Well, by then it's too late. I always, have an analogy. It's like, well, okay, if you go 1 for 3 in a baseball game, you only get to run the first base once. In essence, especially if you're striking out.
Right.
So yeah, that opportunity only come up once, but you still have to keep practicing running so that when that one opportunity comes up, you're ready.
Right.
And maybe that's not the greatest analogy, but what I'm saying is there has to be interwoven into the things that you do, that competitive nature, that competitive spirit, that mano a mano, what I call verse. That's what I do in my gym.
Right.
And, I call versus, and then I'm taking 2 guys and they're doing a drill against each other.
Right.
But I think it's just the way things have gone. Again, maybe there's too much information and maybe there's too much coaching. And again, maybe just to look back as a kid, I've always been competitive, but maybe that stems from the neighborhood games that we played. And with the absence of those neighborhood games, well, maybe that's where we got that aspect of it. Because maybe we're playing with kids that older kids that used to talk mess on you and tease you, and there's a whole dynamic that goes on when you grow up in a neighborhood of 10, 11 kids and you're all playing different sports and that sort of thing. Maybe that's what's missing from these kids, and that's where they have, they don't get to foster that skill set.
Yeah. There's three things I want to point out that you mentioned, and it just kind of rung a bell for me. One was that when you said going 1 for 3 and running to first base, that's practicing running. That's running's part of the game of any sport that has anything to do with those type of things outside of swimming. Obviously, you're in a pool. But what I'm saying is that if a guy gets a base hit, okay, say like it's a base hit to left field and he's practicing his turn and hitting the inside corner of the bag and making a big turn, that's part of that training to run, practicing the proper running form. What if he hit a ground ball to shortstop and he's trying to beat it out? And in his training, he's working on his sprinting. Is he sprinting correctly down the line? So though he may be out, he's still competing and running down that line, working on something instead of saying, "Oh, I hit a ground ball. Let me just kind of jog down to first."
Right.
And the second point that led me to this is that versus against versus, versus competition and training, because you're in practice and I find we're playing more scrimmages just to teach guys how to compete in a game type setting. And we're doing more of that so the pitchers get used to the batters get used to facing pitching, the defense gets used to seeing the runners out there running around, causing chaotic situations, and then also the base runners being more aggressive and seeing what they can do. When you said that versus scenario, I was like, wow, this rings a bell for me. It hits that thing of competition, and that's and that's in the practice setting. That's part of that player development,
right?
That training. But you said these so nicely about that versus scenario. I love that. And saying that. And then the third thing is just understanding, and you make those points, is that, I tell parents out there, listen, these are good things. Player development is not just like having good training or good coaching. That's part of the equation. You put it in a pie scenario. You've got coaching, training, mental mindset, you've got competition, learning how to compete, and then you've got this in-game scrimmaging, then you got the game. That's all of that is encompassing player development and winning strategies for your young athlete.
Right. No, I agree. I don't know if I have much more to add to that. Again, I just think you want to make sure your kid is getting into some scenarios where they're getting competitive. It's not, don't wait just for game time. And if they're not getting it through some of their training, well, maybe you need to start to work on certain things at home. Hey, okay, we're gonna throw, I'm gonna hit you so many ground balls and you gotta catch X amount of them. You know what I'm saying? Whatever it takes to get your juices flowing. It's hard for me because my switch comes on real easy. You know what I'm saying? So
both of us.
Yeah, so for me, it's not a far leap. We
can check, man. We getting after it.
Hey, I got a border collie who every time I want to go up the stairs, she tries to beat me up the stairs. And every time I see her get up next to me, my switch goes on. I'm like, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to get up the stairs before me? I don't know, something maybe innate in her as a dog and a herder. That sort of thing. But
right,
my switch is real easy to flip. So it's hard for me to really say anything more than what I've said. But again, parents, try and figure out what environment you can create. And I guess maybe I'll end with this. I think there's been, not a movement, but there's been a shift in athletics, or at least in the training and raising kids, that competition is not good. Everyone can win. That sort of thing. We've kind of grown. We're from a different era, and we've kind of seen that come about. And I think that's kind of tempered the competitiveness in athletes, because no, it's not the ultimate. No, it's not the only thing, but it's still important. And generally, when we're talking about elite level athletics, you are competing to win.
Right.
There's no bones about it. And yes, you can have those individual victories and wins inside that, but ultimately you need to understand that, sports at the highest level are a business, and it's about winning. So I just think if you keep winning in perspective, and in competition in perspective, but you're able to go out and give it your all, win or lose, and understand that, hey, well, I had some personal wins or personal victories during this loss, but I still want to win, and that still helps to spurn you to be competitive and be better. Then I think that's where we need to fall. But the whole kind of, well, everyone gets a medal, and everyone has a value, and yeah, I get it. But again, I'm just kind of a realist in the sense that in the end, it's what's on the scoreboard.
It is.
And who crosses the tape first?
I like the balance that you left everyone with today, Aaron, about that, putting winning in a perspective and how you closed it out. That's beautiful, man. So with that said, glad you could join us today. Glad you could listen to one of our mini podcasts and talking about player development and winning today. This is Coach EJ, the brand.
And this is Coach Aaron, the source. Everybody, we've got a great series coming up. We're going to release it pretty soon, maybe by the end of the year. Stay tuned for it. It's called Champions Are Built. It's a great series. We're talking to people in the sports industry, famous athletes of past eras, this era, personalities, people behind the scenes. It's going to be a great series. You guys stay tuned for it. We'll see you.